Hello, I'm Len Brown, Len Brown's Innovations, formerly ortho-flex Saddle Company. I do business now as Len Brown's Innovations and also Black Mesa Custom Tree and Saddle. This is Jo Gadberry. She owns Running Star Ranch, and it's nice of her to have us out here on this nice balmy January Missouri day. So thank you for toughing it out, Jo. We'll see how the horses do now.
That'll be wonderful.
But what I'm doing here today is checking Jo's horses. She's very conscientious of her lesson horses here at her barn and wanting to know what kind of shape they're in, if they have problems. She's had some vets out here and chiropractors, I think. But I have been palpating horses for soreness. I rather started this in this country, a thing called saddle fit, and I used to call it sore horse clinics, not saddle fit clinics. So in what I'm doing today, I will try to remove the word fit from my vocabulary and use the word work in place of it. So the question is, does your saddle work? Because the horse is a moving animal. And you can fit a horse all day long while he's standing. Oftentimes, it doesn't work while you're riding. So we'll look at some of Jo's saddles later. We won't do everything that could be done in a clinic today, but I will go into saddle trees. And if I see problems in a horse, I'll pull out a tree. I'll look at her saddle maybe, and we'll show you what's causing the problem in the horse. But I don't need a saddle to see the problem. Anything you do with the horse can be stressing the horse a little too much, whether you override, ride very improperly in some sports, or turn around and have a saddle that's causing the horse to dorsiflex his back and causing problems deep in the spine. I'll go into that in a little while because I have a spinal column here from an old friend of mine that did a 3,000-mile horseback trip with me in 1982. I had 5 horses, a very nice young lady named Lisa Ann Dawes, and myself lived outdoors, rode 8 months with 5 horses, and we traveled New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, back across northeast Colorado through the blizzards, and across Kansas in November in 1982. Living outdoors the whole time, never stayed in a motel once. I learned a lot about saddling. I made my saddle for that trip. I thought I knew a lot when I got through with this trip. I never had a white hair on my black horse after 3,000 miles. But come to find out, I was just a beginner after that trip. So I've been learning ever since. It's now 2016. That was 1982. I'm still learning. So thank you very much, Jo. And we'll do one horse at a time. I'll show you how I palpate horses. And the main thing is not to walk up to a horse and start poking on the horse. The second thing is not to look at the horse and say, oh, he has a lumbar that's out. See how it's high on the right and low on the left. And he has a shoulder that's out because he's bigger on the right and smaller on the left. And so on and so forth. This gives a chiropractor continual work. But in all truth, you can't judge a horse's conformation, you can't judge saddle fit, and you can't judge whether anything's out or not when a horse is standing. You can only judge it while he's moving. So if you think you have a horse that's out, if your chiropractor's told you the lumbar's out and all this other stuff, then have somebody walk the horse. You walk along behind, look over the croup, and look at the back and movement. 9 times out of 10, you'll find that everything's symmetrical. Occasionally, very occasionally, you'll find a very big shoulder on one side of a horse that's that way. It's been that way for a long time. It's not going to change. I had one of those horses on my 3,000-mile horseback trip. So what I did was to build my saddle tree differently for that horse. We mostly packed that horse, rode him occasionally to keep the saddle in the middle of the horse's back, accommodate for his extra large shoulder. So This is to give you a little information for yourself when it comes to the, quote, experts today that are going to help fix your horse. They have one hand out and they are putting stuff in the pocket with the other one in too many cases. So what I can show you in deep pressure massage and what I've shown people in clinics before, anyone can do. Bill Mars has a book, Beating Saddle Soring in Horses and Deep Muscle Massage. It's been available to everybody for 30 years. He was an expert at this, worked for the U.S. equestrian team, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and get started. When I start palpating a horse, I want to make a relationship with that horse. I want him to know that I'm not here to poke him and just to hurt him. This muscle runs down the neck, and in your books it's called a brachiocephalicus. You get the older book in Latin, it's called the levator humeri, and it is elevating the humerus. This is what starts the extension of the foreleg. So if the horse is sore at the origin, and if he's sore at the insertion down here, it means he's overworking this muscle to get his front leg out to stay under himself. This is often caused by a saddle that is pinching in the wither area, the trapezius muscle, causing the back to dorsiflex, overworking the hindquarters, overworking this muscle as well. So I've just started here, but I've got to make friends with the guy. So he gives me honest responses as I go through palpating the rest of the horse. So I do a little bit of deep pressure massage. Now what hurt there to begin with, if you hold, and I can take a set of bathroom scales and with two hands, make them read 220 pounds. So I do have a bit of a paw that has some strength to do this. But you see the eye is starting to soften a little. He's a little apprehensive. We're getting better. That's because I'm just holding with the pressure. This activates the hormonal system. The pain to the brain releases histamines, endorphins, to relax that tensed and sore area. It relaxes the whole horse. At the same time, cross fiber friction is just that on the muscle. This is close to the attachment point, which gets sore first, before the belly of the muscle. The belly of the muscle is the last part of the muscle that gets sore. It's the attachment, the origin, and the insertion are the two attachments where the muscle at the end is attached, right here at the back of the pole. This is why a horse will throw his head and neck up when you're riding at a trot, to make better use of leverage on this muscle to pull the front leg out. Also because it's natural for the head and neck to go up if he's pinched right there. So we're going to say, hey, this guy really pretty nice. He's making me feel good by now. Right? So he's not going to give me a flight response like I'm a predator as I go down the rest of the horse. When I walk up to a horse and I can get a hold of this muscle and do this, then I know how long this horse has been sore and how deep the damage is in the back. Now right now I'm trying to gain his confidence, make him feel a little better. All horses are apprehensive to this. It's a matter of degree. When you find a lot of knotting here, I've seen horses that were ready to go to the killers, the vets, the chiropractors, everybody done all they could. The knotting in this muscle, called spasm, that have been there for a long time, is what makes a horse go lame on the forehand. It doesn't make him go lame, it's a result of as well. all of the muscles through here, stopping the suspension of a deep digital flexor tendon and muscle that is the support cable for the front end of your horse. So, working on a cutting horse one time, I did an hour and a half of massage, a lot of it right here. The horse literally drooled all over the ground. When I got through, he walked out with the rest of the body, obviously. He walked out without the lameness that he had been consistent for almost a full year. Now, that's a horse that was very saddle sore. Now we're gaining a little confidence. I'm going to palpate down under the shoulder. He said, that's a little uncomfortable there. So we've got some soreness in this muscle. It's not natural per se, but it's not bad. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the sorest, this is about a 3. So not bad at all. You can overwork a horse and get this, but more than that's a really speed sport. So next thing I'm going to check for is palpating the spinous processes. Running my fingers right down the spinous processes. It doesn't take a lot of pressure. And I'm feeling in between the spinous processes with my fingertips. This is the veterinary clinical test for spondylitis and spondylosis, which is the advanced form of the early inflammation called spondylitis. I'll show you with a spinal column after a while what that is, but this is what cuts a horse's career short, eliminates the horse being used for anything but walking around, taking care of little kids in no speed sports. That's the most damaging thing that you can do to a horse, is to have the spinous processes impinging on each other because the back is locked down like this as you ride. So this is a reaction that's not too bad. On a scale of 1 to 10, the amount of soreness in the trapezius here, again, is about a 3. It's from pinching of the saddle. The saddle tree itself having too much contact right here. Said, you like me, but you don't want to stick around here. If a horse has been ridden quite a bit, like the day before, a lot, you'll get a response in the loin area. You check with your fingernails. I have no responses right now. He hasn't been ridden too much as of late. But you always have some movement at the rear of the saddle. What this can tell you is the preferred lead of the horse. So the side that the horse flinches on the most in the loin is the preferred lead side for that horse. All horses are either right-handed or left-handed. If he's a left lead horse, he's right-handed. Just like if you're a right-handed person, you lead with your left. When you run, when you walk. And the chiropractor's always trying to straighten you out. You can straighten the horse out through some tricks with saddling and also with riding. And it can be much quicker and more efficient than you would think. We have an idea of what's going on right here. To pick up the leg, palpate the shoulder where a saddle runs into it, right here. That's where the real damage comes, is a saddle tree running into the shoulder. And now, I'm going to turn the horse around. We'll do the other side and see how much difference there is. A lot more sore on this side, is it not? That should give me an indication that if I palpate right here, push with pressure, it isn't going to be near as sensitive right here. Joe, could you hold him for a minute? It isn't going to be as sensitive here, although it's still sore. It is pinched as it is over here. See, I don't have to be pushing with all my weight on the other side, because this side of the wither is what keeps this saddle on this horse from going further to the right. The big response we got down deep here is the horse is a left lead preferred horse. He's dropping his weight on his right front. When he does, he tenses the muscles in the right shoulder, and the saddle drops to the right and it bites in with a bar down here. When that happens, he pulls away from the pain. So the more you ride, it's progressive. The more one-sided he becomes. And the more the wither right here catches the saddle. And you see the soring here because it's rubbing. But it's not as great a pressure as you get down deep right here in the scapula. The way to fix this, to begin with, is to put extra shims, as I call them, balance shims, on this side, none on this side. Shorten the rider's stirrup on the right, lengthen it on the left. The simple way to think of this is to go ahead and burden his left fore while freeing up his right forehand. So your saddle, when you get on, is way over to the left. Takes 3/4 inch balance shims. And you are over to the left. When you start to ride the saddle goes to the middle. It's going to change the way the horse goes, because he is trying to get you over to the right to where he can drop his weight there. He has a lazy left hind. He is starting the lifting action at the left hind and for the right front. He doesn't use it actively. He drops his weight there, and he doesn't push off strongly with the left hind. That's why you get the loin rubbing here on the left lead horse, because when he pushes off with the left hind, he doesn't tighten his back as he should, and he shoves his rear over to the right, and you get more rubbing on the right because you don't have the good firm contact with the saddle. Let's take a break. Let me get a saddle tree, give you a little sample. Okay, to put a saddle tree on the horse and give you a little sample of what can cause some of the problem you see here, the problems that you see in this horse, which are not severe. This is a regular saddle tree made in southern Texas and Laredo. It's a bigger tree company, and it's a custom ordered tree. Most people will not use their saddle back here, but they should. If you look, it's running downhill. It runs into that shoulder, it pinches and impinges upon the shoulder movement very severely when you do. So they will use it up here. We end up very tight at the top. We end up with a little less contact at the bottom. This is an angle problem on these tree bars. We have them flattened out in the rear so we don't bite in right here, but there is not enough twist in this bar to prevent it from biting right here. So if it bites in right there, this is the problem. You add then almost 1/2 inch of leather on each side, it's tighter yet. It's a finished saddle. Seldom do they skive away the leather right here to keep from having a ridge that bites in right there. I, in the middle of the Wyoming desert, finally had ridden my horse enough, and he turned around and he nibbled my foot at a walk. I knew he had a problem. I get off, I move saddle back, he'd be okay for a few miles. I got tired of this. I'd ridden him a long way in the desert there, and noticed that he was getting a squishy spot here, getting kind of sore. I looked at that on him without a pad. And my brand new saddle I'd made for this trip, I just pulled my knife out. I shaved all the leather and sheepskin and everything right out of here and gave him some relief. No more did he ever turn around and nibble my toe. This is your typical angle on a saddle tree. This is a well-built tree. It's just not got the geometry it needs to keep from pinching here. The other problem you have is when you use it back of the scapula, which for a rule of thumb, the back of the elbow is right here. You go straight up from there and you go 1.5 inches back, you have the back of the scapula. That's true on every horse. So if we use the saddle where we should, when you ride, the back comes up, the stomach tightens. It does so at every stride. So the saddle will come down in front as this happens. And it's hard for people, come on, Ben. He said, boy, you're a little rough. It's hard on people to go ahead and use that saddle there, because as the hindquarters go up, see how everything goes down. Pull him to the right there, Joe. This is the rest of palpating. These are semi-membranosus muscle. The back naturally comes up here. And if I do a little deep pressure massage, you would like me better. But you see what happens to the saddle. We lose all contact here. We have a lot of curve in the tree. It all drops down and it bites in here with more pressure than what we would have if it were like this. I'm going to show you a much wider tree. That's my own roping tree. But our contact is here. Our contact is not here. So regardless of the saddle tree that I grab for different models of saddle and put on this horse or any other horse, you will see that as I put it behind the shoulders, I have something to hold the saddle up in front. The seat is no longer diving downhill even with this wide tree, and I have no pinch on either side. The way you get this is to put twist in the bar. So you go from almost flat in the rear to quite steep in the front. A little bit of flare at the end, not a whole lot of flare sticking out like this, or you're riding only on the mid-back. When I bring the back up on this horse now, we do not have complete loss of contact of this tree in the rear, because it is this twist and the foot of this bar that straightens this bar for the horse's back so that it works as you ride. Your tree is straighter, the tree doesn't pinch. The back will come up when you get on, the back will come up when you ride, and you still got your contact, and your leg comes off of this saddle onto the horse. You carry a lot of weight with your thigh. The other thing that's quite different from any other saddle, this tree, like all saddles today, has a slot for the stirrup strap to go through. There's not really any slot on the bottom. That means your stirrup strap creates a good bump that's over 1/4 inch thick right here. Most leathers here being closer to 3/8 or 11/32. So that bump comes under the bar, and that's above the skirt, and the horse can feel it like a pebble in your shoe. Every time he brings the back up and it lifts the most right here, he runs into the stirrup strap and it hurts. So he wants to pull away. Then you pinch more here. Continual problems with that. The only way to build a tree properly for something like this is to put a full groove underneath for the stirrup strap. or to put full-length leather on either side of the strip strap to make the groove. Nobody does it. You can do it. I've done it on trees. But what I do has been done before, and it is to put stainless steel strap and an aluminum loop that moves, and what it does is recess the stirrup strap, both for the horse, moving it up, and for the rider. We do not have to build the seat up above this area. Therefore, this seat is narrower across here, even though the tree is wider here. When you make a bar thick enough to put a groove top and bottom, you have widened the tree for the rider in the seat. One of the problems with saddling is you can make a saddle that works for the horse. If it isn't comfortable for the rider, guess what? Nobody's gonna use it. So you not only have to make a saddle to work for the horse, you have to make a saddle to work for the rider. This is one way to do it. This was done by Hamleys in the late 1800s. They are the Rolls-Royce of Western saddlery throughout the years, way up into the 50s or 60s when they stopped making saddles, or maybe before that. But they made their own trees, like I make my own trees. I spent all of my retirement right here because I can't build saddles without having something that I can make work. Okay, let's go around to the rear of the horse because I started that. Take him that way, Joe. Show you another place to palpate. That's good. Whoa. Friction soaring you check for here. The stirrup strap bump you check for right where the stirrup straps would be, right here. That doesn't take much pressure. But every time this horse reaches with a hindquarter, that back comes up. And every time he drops his head and neck, the back comes up. When he tenses his stomach, the back comes up. The back becomes quite straight while you're riding. And the way to palpate on the hindquarters, two different muscles. Semitendinosus, which is the hamstring that runs right down through here. It's a longer, thinner muscle. It will give you more reaction, tells you more story than the semitendinosus over here. And this is the attachment point of a semitendinosus, which runs down through here. But on quarter horses, semitendinosus will give you quite a bit of reaction because they use it a lot. They have a big, powerful hindquarter. They have to overuse that hindquarter quite often because if the back is tight, like it is here, to lighten the forehand, which starts the ground in the rear at the hoof and works its way up through the hamstring, to lighten that forehand, they have to use these hindquarters and their hamstrings. Now, this is palpating. What I was doing then was massage. See, this muscle is fairly tight, but again, this horse doesn't rate but a 2 or a 3 back here. He's very powerful back here. I've had horses that kick out with both hind legs. I start at the front, I work my way back, and I end up holding on to them while I'm doing deep pressure right here. Because it feels good as you do it. But that's the muscles you check for back here to see how much they're being overworked. This is compensatory soreness. They're compensating for the lockdown muscle by overworking. The hamstrings, they will work the gluteals and overwork the gluteal right here. That's just a little bit of soreness in the gluteal from work. There's no saddle touching anything back here. And then the longissimus dorsi, which attaches at the sacrum, It goes around the little spearhead of the gluteal here that goes into this, to the spinous processes come out to the side off the vertebral column. The longissimus dorsi is the muscle that runs all the way down the back and under the shoulders and into the base of the neck. And I said a muscle. It is a segmented muscle. It is segments of muscle that attach to the upper spinous process. I'm going to get a vertebral column I can describe a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to show you a vertebral column, most of it. And last time I rode this guy, he bucked me off. As I always said, this horse woke up in a new world every morning. He was an American saddlebred, 16 hands tall, was shown the American Royal, did the 3,000-mile horseback trip, all of it. And he did well. When I rode him, he wore me out at the end of a week. So I get back on my Missouri Foxtrotter. I rode him most of the time. This guy did, as a pack animal, a 16-hand saddlebred, as a pack animal for 3,000 miles. And he did not have a problem with saddles in doing such, but this is the vertebral column. This is the withers. And as we go back, I can't really give you the rest of the lumbar vertebra. They get larger, they come out quite far, and this is where the most powerful part of the horse's back is. So this gives you an idea, but this is off a yearling. I have the rest of it over there. This is just off the yearling. The vertebrae here get much larger and more massive. The muscles attach here and here. As you go down the back, that longissimus dorsi attaches to the uprights of each vertebra and run forward, downward, and onto the upper rib cage under the latissimus dorsi, which is a sheet of muscle which actually runs into the shoulder and has some action in moving the shoulder. So as you sore the outer muscle of the latissimus, you also get problems in the shoulder area. As you pinch the trapezius, which is above this longissimus, it makes the longissimus tighten. It makes the back drop right here. As it drops, it pulls these spinous processes together and they impinge upon each other. So this whole unit drops when that longissimus tightens. This is what's called kissing spines in lay term, spondylitis in the proper term, veterinary term, and spondylosis when it's so bad that you have these interfering with each other to the point that they literally fuse. The vertebrae themselves open at the bottom. There are 4 interlocking joint surfaces on each mating here of the vertebra. And they open from the top, they open at the bottom, they compress at the top of the vertebra, right here. So as we are compressing here, we are opening here, and you ride your horse that way, it damages spine itself. Once this gets sore, you can take a horse with full-blown spondylosis that stands 17 hands. I've done this in England, an eventing horse. With my fingertips, I can drop that horse to the ground. A horse that's cast in the stall every morning is a horse with spondylosis or spondylitis. Usually it's the full-blown spondylosis. He can in no way relax his back and let it drop. It hurts too much. This is why the horse that just blows up all at once when you're doing any kind of turning at speed and he just blows up, it's usually from spondylitis, spondylosis. How long does it take before it starts? When I was at Churchill Downs in Lexington, Kentucky, working for a client and palpating different horses at the stables, young race horses, 2/3 of them already had spondylitis, 2 years old. Doesn't take long, and it starts with bad saddling and bad riding, which they get the worst. So this is what you want to keep away from. A warning to you, and that is if you have a horse with quite a bit of drop to the back, or even a horse like this, and you want the saddle to be contacting in the middle, so people will have what they think is almost sway back, and they'll use pads to fill in there, or they will build an extra curved saddle tree. When a horse brings his back up, it's like a rocking chair, like saddles already are, and it will bite in, cause him to drop, and cause this very problem. The last thing you ever want to do is to use a build-up pad for a dropped back, because that back has to come up when you ride. And the last thing you want to do is to put the too curved saddle on, but also creates the pressures, the stirrup straps, etc., etc. Thank you very much. We'll get another horse now and be back. Decided that before we put this horse up, we will solve a few of these problems. This is a number 3 horse. It's not a 7, 8, or a 9. So number 3 means it's got some normal, very typical, just moderate contraction in the muscles, pinching, soring, and so on, which could be fixed, a lot of it with deep pressure massage, but you'll also find once you use product that stops all the pressures and pinching, just take the horse out and work it in at speed and circles, figure 8s, and straight run, bring it back. In 15 minutes, most of the tightness you see will be gone. I have a gentleman who fox hunts in Lansing, Kansas, Leavenworth, and he had an extremely sore horse, 3 times as bad as this. He got my protector pad, took his hunt saddle, went on a 12-mile fox hunt, came back, and almost all the soring was gone. It was all at speed. We're going to see what this saddle is doing. This is one of the saddles they use on this horse. We're just going to set it on the horse and look at it and check it. When I do this, I usually do it without a pad. And as I told you, if the saddle was used where it should be for the shoulder to rotate, it would be used back here. But it would be so low in front, it would pinch a little much because of how down it is in front. When you put a pad on it, it gets a little tighter here. That can be a problem too. When I set it up here where they use it, typically, it is in the pinch mode. I can get my fingers under the bottom of the bar, but I don't get them under here. Too often skirts are quite thick and extend out in front of the tree, so they become an extension of the tree. So the skirt pinches the horse before the bar gets to. Another problem in the way saddles are made has nothing to do with function, has everything to do with fashion. But that's just looking at this saddle on this horse. This horse is ridden with it occasionally by a little larger rider. The other problem that Joe mentioned is this horse is very cinchy. Horses get cinchy on the front edge of a girth because a flat strap on this conical barrel is actually tighter at the front than it is at the back. And this is a very typical reaction. The latissimus muscle that I told you about has the stirrup strap rubbing back and forth against the top of the unprotected buckle on the girth, which gives you much of this. There are more muscles that come together right here from the triceps, the abdominal, the latissimus, and the trapezius. Then you can imagine this gets into a horse's mind from the girth, along with the sensitivity we get down here. I'm going to show you what I do to solve this problem. This is a girth that is shaped like a horse. You should be able to see the flare in this girth at the back. I write front on this crepe. This is Chusseau crepe, very durable. And we mold this leather in a stiffening agent on a mold that I made. We have two versions of this. This is the near tight. It is made to fit a horse because it's shaped like a horse. This one could use a little larger than the 32 because I like to see a buckle come right to where the horse starts to level off, right here. So he could use just a little longer girth. But the way this is made, it contacts at the sternum. It's got 6 inches of very firm, good contact at the sternum, right down in the center. It comes up the side and I can slip my hand under it right here. When you tighten this, you will tighten under the buckle so you have contact there that holds. You have contact on the sternum that takes most of the pressure, almost all of it, on the fixed ribs, which does not bother the horse's breathing at all. You then have contact, but it's not tight, it's just near tight. You can always slip your fingers in here. It is a little looser at the front edge than it is at the rear. But it has the conical shape put into the girth. The reason I call this near tight is when you pull and tighten here, you don't pull the curve out of here. The horse right off the sternum, the ribs become flat. It's called the flat of the ribs, right through here. That's where most girths bite in the most. Here, it bites in not at all. It holds your saddle with a, quote, 3-point contact. Here and here, under the buckles, which are protected, and right there. This is actually molded to where it flows downward in a way to keep from pinching and biting in on the sternum, because you'll see horses cinch toward there if they're ridden at speed. That's the girth problem.
So, Len, my question for you is, when we are talking about this, the horse, and you are sitting the saddle back, most of the time when we're riding this horse, our saddles are more forward. But if we slid it back, then we get an angle of the saddle that's pinching right here.
So you want to know how to fix that?
Yes, I do. Okay.
Problem being, as I said earlier with that tree, they have to use their saddle up here. It's the lesser of two evils. If they move it back here, it dives into the shoulder, pinches severely. And Joe wants to know, how do we move it back where we should, where saddles were used for many hundreds or even thousands of years? They go back to 600 or 700 AD, the McClellan. How do you move it back, free up the shoulder, and not bite into it?
Yes.
I will go get a corrector shield. I'll get the corrector pad. I'll get some balance shims. I'll show you the basics of how we do it.
All right.
To try to answer your question here and fix this problem, this is the corrector. That's the first device after ortho-flex that I sit down and designed to work and not lessen the contact from the rider to the horse like ortho-flex panel system did under a tree, and to spread the pressures out over a large area to stop the pinching that happens under the saddle tree, and also to protect the loin. So in this, let me show you what's actually inside here. The newer protector version, this is all made, these shields right here are all made into a pad. And this lies right here. And you can see that it is molded to the shape of a horse and works surprisingly well in shaping basically to any horse. So what this is doing when you put the saddle tree on, I put a mark, says front of tree bar here. And I put that mark on the pad. So I've made these slots to where they all line up right through here, and they get larger as they go in. So we have a soft spot in here. As the horse bends and turns, he no longer runs into the bar of the tree when it's placed behind the shoulder. He bends this shield, and that shield pushes back against that tree. It's a flexible lever. It makes your saddle ride back of the shoulder. Still have one problem. You can pinch through anything if you ride downhill all day long. So, with that problem being recognized, you use balance shims. The balance shims go on top of this shield, just like this. Okay? They stair step as you add them. You're going to add them to both sides. When you add these 3 layers, 1/4 inch each, you will lift the saddle up on the other side as well by using it as well. So it raises the saddle 1 inch and 1/4, even though it's only 3/4 inch thick, because you have added it to both sides. This picks the saddle back up, keeps it from setting down, and I try to alleviate the pinching here by dropping it down and away there as well. So we're lifting, and we get a lot of contact down here that we didn't have before, whereas we get a little gap up here, whereas we didn't have it before. So that's to try to lift, to balance the rider without pinching. This is the problem as a riding instructor, and you've got a barn. And I go to English stables, and I watch my daughter for 30 minutes of a 45-minute lesson. She's warming this horse up. This horse is too sore to be ridden until it's been ridden for 30 minutes. The horse is then warmed up, and then she has 15 minutes of lesson. Yet the lady wants to be paid for 45. So if you stop soaring in a horse and you have a 45-minute lesson, you get your whole 45 minutes worth. But that's the basic corrector, protector system, is these shields. Put this back up here the way I used it for many years, and you'll see how it's positioned and held together. And I'll put the tree back on here. And I have rear shims as well. And the reason for using rear shims is you have a little horse over here that will need them, or a very straight-backed horse without much drop that will need the rear shims, where you lose that contact on this saddle tree or your saddle tree. Back here, when the back's up, you put the rear shim in, you pick up the contact. So here we are with a basic corrector system, and we're spreading the weight out. We're going to get a hold of the horse better. No longer does this pinch at all, yet we haven't lifted the saddle up, except in the front in this situation. If I put it on both sides, it'll lift it a little more. It'll stop your pinch right here. It'll pick up your contact right here. It holds your saddle where it should be, because the horse is body bending, shoulders rotating, continually doing this. It scoots the saddle back out of the way of the shoulder movement. Therefore, you have to pick it back up with some balance shims. The extra twist you see in my bars, just take less balance shims, because we already have something holding the saddle up in front, and it's down here. We're not compensating as much, in other words. So that is how you fix.
How do you keep it from, you said it shifts it back.
Uh-huh.
How do you keep it from sliding on back? Is that where just the growth comes in and helps hold it in place?
It really doesn't slide on back, because most horses have a downhill slant anyway. even when they pick their back up. You'll notice that this opening here, as the back comes up, this opens. This is a part of the patent. It's an elliptical cut here. So when the back is down, this closes. It drops for the horse. As the horse bends and turns, it opens on the outside of the turn. Keeps it from being scooted around. It's one of the problems with saddle pad. They always want to scoot out, don't they? Okay, so the cut of this lets it move with a horse. That's why it's patent protected on just the cut, as well as all the rest of the features. But, good question. How do you keep it from just going on out the back? I'll tell you the main how, and that is this shield here is the shape of the horse. It's moving with the horse as he moves, and it's caught. So I have 3-day eventers that do high-speed jumping out on the courses that don't have to tie their pad to their saddle anymore. They're using a protector pad because this shield is caught between upward bending forces and the downward pressure. It can't go anywhere. It doesn't scoot out the back. Surprisingly enough, the only problem we have with the pad scooting is the horse starts to round his back a lot more, riding at a trot a lot, or cantering, and the pad will scoot forward because you lose your contact up here, and the contact is in the middle of the back. So when a pad scoots forward, we put the rear balance shims in along with a couple of front balance shims, give him room to bring his back up. We put even pressure back on the front shields, and the pad no longer scoots out the front. I've only done this a few thousand times, but that's a good question. I thought I would show you on this horse, since this horse is cinching. They have a problem with saddle sliding too far back much of the time. As I said earlier, the saddle should be back there. The corrector protector system will put it back there. Then you lift it back up with the balance shims as needed to balance the rider, to where they're not all the time pushing against the stirrup to get back in the comfortable part of the seat to be able to ride with some comfort. All that pressure from the stirrup when you're pushing yourself into the comfortable part of the seat goes right to the front of the tree, and it pinches. So that's why balance is everything in this game for the horse and the rider. As riding instructors, and I've worked with some of the top riders in the world and some of the top instructors. Molly Sifright, Thinking Riding series books at the Talon School in Cirencester, England. Rode my saddle for many years. And in working with these riders and trainers, it is that you can be a good rider, but if your saddle is not balanced so that you have a neutral seat to operate from, you cannot ride well, and your horse will not do well. As dressage would go, or reining, or really any sport that takes some considerable horsemanship in the sport and some good riding. So you have to have a balanced seat. This is the cowboy dressage. This is my saddle. It's a 17-inch saddle in the seat, quite short for the horse really, only 25 inches long here to here at the center and the rear. But what I do with the rigging to compensate, and I do this with a lot of my saddles, to compensate for needing to hold the saddle one way or the other, is to put a 3-slot arrangement. I always work off the center, which is about a 7/8, and that usually gets us right into the heart girth area here, which is going to be within 3 or 4 inches of the elbow. That normally holds the saddle where it should be when it's just back of the shoulder. The protector pad will move it further back if it needs to be further back for the horse. His own movement, the leverage that he provides to that shield, scoots your saddle out of the way of his natural movement. This is what makes this so unique, the protector system, so unique compared to some of the knockoffs in the way of saddle pads that copied the old ortho-flex flat panels. To use the near tight girth, I have a horse that's a lot bigger than this, so my girth fits this one better. I'm going to show you a little something to you that I showed to D. Pickett, 2 times all-round world champion cowboy, the first $1 million money winner in roping, and a man that I worked with for many years, and I learned a lot from D, and he learned some from me. But it's how you girth the horse. This is a cinchy horse. He turns around and he bites. You saw that he had lots of reaction here up the front edge of the girth. He said, "Would you please quit that?" So, turn your horse this way some. That's good. Now what I'm going to do, I've only got 2 wraps through there. I'll take another one. I want to tighten him up really good. Get a lot of leverage. The more times you take your latigo strap through the girth from here to here, the more of a pulley action you have. Tremendous leverage in the Western latigo system. I like to make my own nylon latigos, which are quite thin, provide no bulk, and it slides on itself very easily. So as I tighten, first thing I'm going to do is I want to push against the horse. I want to lean against him till he's pushing back against me. In doing this, I'm steadying him. I'm going to reach as close as I can get. I'm going to pull straight out. Would you like to come check, see how tight that is? So that's all you need, except for the other side. I haven't tightened the other side. This girth is the shape of the horse. All girths for hundreds of years, all Western saddles had a latigo strap on both sides and were tightened on both sides. So in doing that, when you get on, you will not pull the saddle over because you're loose on the off side and tight on the near side. So if I walk around tight in the off side before I get on, saddle stay right where you put it. That should be done with every saddle, and it was until the saddle makers in the early sport of rodeo required the participants to toss saddles from horses to horse to horse, a saddle from horse to horse to horse. They used an off billet. And in using the off billet, they could do that and only cinch on one side, hop right back on. The saddle manufacturers used their scrap and put off billets on saddles and saved $10, $15 a saddle and convinced you that's what you're supposed to use. Until then, everybody used a latigo strap tightened on both sides, just like the English rider tightens on both sides. So, to go ahead and loosen the girth, if it were buckled up, you can see I can tighten it even more, or I can loosen it. But if I'm pushing against the horse, he knows what to expect, and he's pushing back against me, which is his most basic response. His response is to push against pressure, not to yield to it. One of the funny things to me, the basis of Pirelli's natural horsemanship is to teach your horse to give and move away from pressure. And I can take a Pirelli horse, and it takes me 2 or 3 tries, and he's pushing back against me anyway, because it's his natural response. So that's how you tighten without a horse without bothering the horse. And if you notice, this girth, I can still get under it right here. So I can still get my hand in here, but I can't right here. and I certainly can't on the sternum. So that's the little trick, is putting the flare in the girth to start with, so it's near tight, where it's the most ouchy with a flat strap tightened on that flat of the ribs. And by the way, if you look at the way the tree's made, and this is a totally different tree than was on the horse a while ago, I have no pinch. My whole hand goes in here. My contact is at the bottom. It's holding the saddle up in front. The seat is balanced. We have no need for balance shims because of the way the tree's made. So anytime you use balance shims with my trees, it's the minute adjustment for the rider's balance. Thank you. Group of riding instructors here. I want to show them a little something that makes riding for themselves or other students or anybody else a little easier, especially for learners. And this is a cam stirrup. I patented this some years ago, but not in this version right here. This is new. As you put pressure in the strap all at once, the strap here wants to take this cam and pull it in line. You see that rubbed area on the strap? Okay, that's from me throwing a lot of pressure with my foot and leg in the stirrup, and the stirrup wants to kick out because the cam is fixed. It's being pulled in line with the strap. When it's in line with the strap, it's like this. So the more pressure you throw in a stirrup, sudden stop, a big jump sideways, the more pressure you throw in a stirrup, the more your foot and leg go out away from you. Just normal riding, you're riding heels down when the cam's forward. So I call it the perfect rider stirrup. They can't ride anyway but heels down. But the heels down in the lessons for English riding does what? Almost the same thing as in a stirrup. That's how you stay in the English saddle when you're jumping. Mm-hmm. Now, for barrel racers and for ropers, that's the last thing they want. And for many endurance riders, they can't take it. They ride in the stirrup, and they shouldn't. So you simply take this thing apart, turn it around, and put the cam toward the rear. If you think of it, no longer do we kick out, but we kick back. So as you stand the stirrups, as a barrel racer or a roper, your foot and leg goes back. Your toe goes down, your leg goes back, you go against the swell, you stay there until you let the pressure out of the stirrup. So Ed and Martha Wright, a lady was in their clinic, she had these, she had them on this way. She remembered what I said, and they were yelling at her and giving her a hard time because she couldn't get forward, she couldn't stay forward, she didn't have quite the nerve she needed or whatever. She remembered to turn the stirrups around. She did, went right back out there, and they started bragging on her because she was forward, she was staying forward, she was going faster. She's in her late 40s, she has a PhD, and she's out there placing number 10 out of a 220 field participants in barrel racing. So she's doing great. She's down in Texas and having a ball. She really loves these. She uses the girth. She uses everything. And they can't figure out how this old lady is competing against these young girls. So that's a little of basics. But you get an idea of what I do with saddle, what I do with this rigging. I didn't go ahead and tell you. When I want to hold the saddle back, I go through the girth, back to the front, through the girth again, here. You notice this horse trusts me now? Okay. I will go ahead and pull right down here close. Tighten it some. I've got to go through the girth one more time, don't I? I forgot about that. Because you can't tie a cinch knot in a latigo strap and have a girth really tight. So I've already tightened this a little. If I hadn't, what I would do, I forgot to put this in there, is I will simply pull up on this right here, tighten it all I can, pull a play out of it right here, and my last pull, and this is to hold saddle back, will be right here. So I want the last bit of pull on the front strap. And by doing that, what I'll do is place my rigging further forward and get it tightened up there than it would be otherwise. And by pulling from here, that holds saddle back. If I want to pull the saddle forward because it slides too far back, I do just the opposite. Go through here, and back down through here, and then I buckle up. And by buckling here at the back, I pull the saddle forward. I do this on many of my saddles. So you can go from any kind of animal, uphill, downhill, flat backed, you name it, and hold saddle where you want it. Everything's smooth, no lumps and bumps, and most of all, no big, stiff, hard plates of metal right here. Because it's not comfortable to horse, it's sure not comfortable to rider. So this is the perfect rider strip. Near tight cinch. Many performance and behavior problems come from here. Ropers have 8 seconds for a horse to do everything right. A heading horse that's sore down here will dodge off on the steer every time until you fix it. You can have the same problem from under the saddle. You fix that, he'll still dodge off from the steer because of this. That's one of the things I found about how much the girth affects the performance and the behavior at the same time. As John Lyons told me a long time ago, and I did saddle zip for John his whole career, and that is a whole lot of pain all at once under saddle will mess up your horse's performance and behavior, just like that. A little bitty bit of pain over a long period of time, all of a sudden in the future sometime will jump up and mess up all that performance and behavior, and you won't know where it came from. If it's a whole lot of pain, you can find a spot. If it's not visible anywhere, you can't figure out what it is. Sometimes it's this, sometimes it's this, sometimes it's too much of any one of those to give you the performance and the behavior problem. Okay, Joe said one of the problems of this horse is he's heavy on the forehand. It's hard to get him to lighten up on the front. And he's built a little downhill. He's a little downhill, which makes it harder for him to use that big, heavy, powerful hindquarters to lighten the forehand. So it's more work for him. We're gonna, his name's Skip. We'll go over Skip just the way I did the first horse. See what we see in the way of tightness in the muscles. Little apprehension here, but not bad. So this is just feeling good at this point. They always work their mouth when it feels good. Like I said, the horse that was dead lame just slobbered all over the place. So we don't have a big problem here, do we? Tells us one thing. We don't have a big problem in the rest of the horse. Because this is compensatory soreness. There's no saddle here. Getting his confidence. That felt good up there above, but it's a little touchier down here. And this is a natural aversion to somebody getting a hold of their neck, called a predator. He said, that just feels downright good. This is part of your deep pressure massage. Cross fiber friction, you can hold pressure and you can release, then go back to the cross fiber friction, and you do this until the horse won't take it anymore, and then you stop and you hold again. I have made what human physical therapists use for this, called T-handle, in the field of Rolfing. That's the kind of massage that I do. And the T-handle lets you push without having your fingers all crooked and everything like mine. Use more pressure than you could use otherwise. Okay, now we'll do the little test for spondylitis. There's no natural reaction in the horse here, except a little tiny fly jerk in some horses, and that's all. You see there's nothing here. Anytime you look at buying a horse, taking a horse in for training, or you name it, this is the first thing you want to do. Or you might be having to overcome more than you bargained for. When a horse does have spondylitis or spondylosis, you have to ride it in collection. It cannot be ridden with head up, back down. It has to be rounded. This loosens the problems in the back. It loosens the back. A horse that's had it and will drop 3 or 4 inches, that's about a number for 4 or 5 in a scale of 1 to 10. One that drops to the ground is full-blown spondylosis. But when they've had spondylitis, they have calcium deposits in the spinous processes where they've been impinging. When they start moving, when you give them a good saddling situation and the horse starts moving his back, it breaks that loose. You get fluid bumps here, although it's not particularly painful to the horse. So the fluid bumps here are a positive sign if the horse does and has had spondylitis in the past. Okay, now, this very downhill horse, when you're riding, is not quite so bad when he's up. Take a look at the back, Joe. See, what is surprising is it comes up more than that. So we have a straight back horse all of a sudden. This is what you do with good riding, good saddling. Then you don't have what you looked like you had just a moment ago. The withers are wide, they're not high. Pinching is very easy on this kind of wither. So he's getting plenty of that. Stirrup strap problem is the worst right here. Because of this very wide round back, the stirrup straps are hitting him right in there. He doesn't want to stand for that at all. Okay, we'll leave you alone there. Okay? Whenever a horse is tight, right here on a tricep where it wraps around the ulna, if he flinches right there, it means that the 3 tricep muscles and one other muscle in this shoulder, along with all the trapezius, rhomboideus, everything else tight. If he's flinching here, you will have intermittent lower leg lameness. During a show, next day he's fine. This is from saddling. If you see it. Have to ride a lot, but it happens quite a bit. He's not working too hard.
He carries little riders.
Yeah, he's carrying little riders, she said. Okay, that's a good example of a horse that's just really not got a big problem. He's just pinched in the withers is all his problem is, and running into shoulders. And it's only about a 2.5 or 2. He's not as bad as the first horse. You happy we're through with all that, huh? Yeah, okay. Yeah. No, you can't bite me. Thank you. Mares are harder to work with. Fillies, the worst. I'll take a stallion any day over a filly at a clinic when I don't know what I'm going to get into with even really sore horses. The stallion gives you a 100% honest response. The filly is playing a game and doesn't want anything to do with it. And mules give you the most personal, they have the most personality, give you the unbelievable responses when you get a sore mule. Doing this palpating, checking, doing deep pressure massage. Well, we're pretty sore down here. Pretty tight down there. Not too tight in the belly of the muscle though.
That's good.
So it's something that's not what you call severe. It's just tight from a little overwork, but not a whole lot. Pretty level back on this horse. So it has an advantage to the fact that your saddle's not diving downhill into this wither and overworking the levator humeri to extend the front leg. No problem here. These are the rhomboids. When you have a really sore horse, you're going to get a response from the rhomboids. They lift the scapula up and forward, and they attach underneath the scapula, right in here. Whereas the trapezius works just the opposite, and on top of the scapula. There's a cartilage of prolongation on the scapula that has the muscle attaching to it, and just in front of it actually, and it glides in between the layers of muscle as the shoulder rotates. So there's this much cartilage of prolongation on that scapula. That's why sometimes you can be fooled by the lump or bump that you see, which I talked about the position of the scapula being an inch, inch and a half back of the elbow. Sometimes you'll see another lump here of muscle. It's not the scapula usually, if you get down in deep and check. We'll check withers here, say, yep, we got a little of that. Hard to get away from with typical saddles. And saddles, period, always create a certain amount of discomfort in the horse. They always have. Napoleon didn't make it to Russia. The British lost 90 out of 150,000 horses that they shipped by steamboat to South Africa in the Boer Wars. And they lost the Boer Wars because the cavalry never got to the battle. They did an investigation by Parliament and decided it was bad saddles, saddle sores, the tropics, open wounds, putting the horses out of commission quick. So they redesigned their trooper saddle and as best they could. But just like the American cavalry, U.S. cavalry, never could catch an Indian. They couldn't even catch an old band of Nez Perce old people on their Appaloosas outran the U.S. military. And it's an interesting thing because the Indians didn't ride just bareback. The Indians did have saddles per se, and they had stirrups attached to the leather down here. They traded for stirrups back in the 1600s. So they'd rest their foot in a stirrup at a walk. They had a channel in the leather where they could stuff it so they'd stay off the spine. And at speed, they leaned forward, they stayed on their thighs from the knee up and rode at speed and picked up the stirrup with their moccasin toes and held it back. So they didn't run pressure across the middle of the back from the stirrups. They had a more efficient bareback pad a la treeless saddle than anything made today, but they were physically capable of riding it as well. That's why the U.S. cavalry could never catch them. Okay, we know what we have here. We'll have a little soreness in these shoulders too. We know that. Wintertime, we haven't had enough fresh riding to get the friction soring here. Okay. She's not overworking the hindquarters, you notice? The semi-membranosus is not sore because we don't have this downhill situation. We get under ourselves very easily in the rear. We pick up the front. So she's doing better because of her natural conformation. And one nice straight back. One of the things probably getting in the way is those little stirrup bumps. Right there. Okay. Thank you very much. A good example of a completely different horse. Joe told me this is Sherman, an ex-reining horse. He's turning 20 this year. And Sherman says, I don't mind the little kids. Just don't give me any big riders like me, huh? Okay. Does that get your attention, Sherman? He's not bad. Oh, yeah. Okay. This is the insertion. It's the end of the muscle with the most movement and the most stress. So it's a little sore here, but it's not anything to be concerned about per se, because he's still loose in the belly of the muscle. Everything's loose there. We get a little reaction from this, the spondylitis, and I would expect this horse to have had it over his lifetime, to have some, quote, impinging on the spinous processes. But nothing to be worried about there, and the main thing is if he still lifts his back. The horse with full-blown spondylosis, where it's almost fused in the spinal column, and the damage is very bad in the spinous processes. Once you hit that horse and palpate here and he drops his back, he will lock his back up. And he will no longer move but up, down, or anywhere, or give you any response of any kind. But the first time, he gave you huge response. See? That's the horse that has full-blown spondylosis. We don't have a big problem with Sherman. He's carrying more little kids than adults. That's good. He said, this just feels good. Yeah, yeah. And you know, I noticed that the horses haven't been ridden much since January in Missouri. But, because if they've been ridden very much, we'd have some more soreness from the loin area. But it's good for this particular session to have some horses that, although they haven't been actively rode hard and put up wet, so to speak, they are giving you the responses of what damage or tightness and soreness is there. So that's kind of good, because people say, well, I'm going to turn my horse out for 2 months or 3 months or whatever. It doesn't work. It usually stays right there. The best way to loosen up the horse and to loosen the muscles is to get him out and really ride him at speed, eliminate the pressure problems that you have, put the horse in stretching speed work. It loosens it up quickly. Okay, Sherman's fine. Let's see what we got.
So he was definitely sore. We had issues. He would just buck and be crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
full on bronc bucking. It's much better now.
Yeah,
He's definitely sore at that time.
yeah, well, he's tight all the way through this muscle, the levator humeri. Very tight, see?
He's pretty much tight all the time. He's ready to go all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. This may be our good one for the palpating. A little deep pressure work. Oh, yeah.
Yes, he does bite and kick with chiropractic stuff sometimes.
Chiropractors make him bite and kick.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. Yeah. What's the matter, fella? Listen to all that noise? Wind blow? Yeah. Oh, no, I'm not going to have anything to do with this. Yeah. You can do more with the deep pressure work if you know how to do it. Then you can think about with chiropractic, but it's a heck of a lot more work. You can spend an hour on a horse. That's more work than horseshoeing for that hour. See, he's pushing up against me now. He's not moving away. So we're gaining a little bit of confidence there. He's going to be very sore right down here. So I'm going to go easy with him because he is sore. He'll just work his mouth now. Head down, that's good. Back here, Charles. The way you do a horse like this is you put him up against the wall for a gate. Then they can't go anywhere. But we may get past this little bit of apprehension because I'm going to loosen up here some now. And you often have horses push into you when it starts to feel good. Work the little nose. Turn around a little bit here, Joe, so that the camera can catch the personality we're getting here. Yeah, good boy. So this is what you have to do before you go down the horse and start palpating. When the horse is sore, you have to have this first. You have to have a positive result from what you're doing before you can go any further. Yeah, fella. We're starting the problem right here. And that is, he's working with his back so tight that we're getting a light response on the spondylitis. And that isn't very nice to him, and he's stepping away and not wanting any more of it, because you don't make him feel better doing this. It never gets better. See? So that's the problem that he's starting with. It's a very mild, early on result. Here, come on, you back up. Yeah, don't cow kick me. No. A little bit downhill, thin enough wither the saddle's going to go down even more. Shoulder wither area is not too wide. Get off of me. He knows this is coming next. Ah. What I told you about having a problem down here, it's worked its way through the shoulders to where he, right here off the elbow, starting to get tight. Yeah. That means he's been sore for quite a while.
Yeah, we've been trying to work through.
Plenty deep. It's plenty deep. It's going to take a while to get out. He's young enough. He shouldn't have too much problem. But, okay, fella. Ah. He's right lead preferred. Every time. And it's fun when you can go up, check somebody's horse and tell them all about it. Yeah. You could do that after watching it. So, in that situation, it means he's dropping the saddle to this side. It hurts more down deep here. Okay. Up here, it's going to hurt on this side, right here. It takes no pressure at all. He just doesn't want you to touch it. So, a good long session of the deep pressure massage would do him a lot of good. The riding protector pad, balancing the saddle, will do the same. I have some of the top chiropractors in the world and physical therapists that use the protector pad. A few of them sell it, but not very often. They don't have anything to do if they sold it. Yeah. He's kind of got it everywhere.
He's very tense.
Yeah, he said, right here, so many muscles come together. Yeah. Okay. And he's going to be working extra hard with this hindquarter, and it's going to be tight too. So that gives you your 6 or 7 on the semi-membranosus, semi-tendinosis right here. That's even sore.
Clearly.
Now you stop that nasty stuff. Come here. To do this and you can do it with your thumb yourself. To do this, you find the attachment points. That's where it hurts. And you just hold pressure on it. After a little bit, it stops hurting. Yeah, and then you wiggle just a little bit across fiber, and you push again. You feel it soften up a little bit, you do a little across fiber again. And you just push. My thumb is white. A lot of pressure. But see, all of a sudden, we're over here working our mouth. Once they figure out what you're doing makes them feel better when you do it, you have no problem going all the way around the horse. Semitendinosus gets the most sore. It's about 1.5 inches outside the base of the tail where it attaches, right there. But it's the pressure, letting them relax because of the pain, letting the brain do its job, a little more cross-fiber friction, back to the pressure. So it's a balancing act. Good boy now, aren't you? Yeah. So going down the other side of the horse, doing all of these muscles and so on, a whole lot of time. You need a T-handle. I'm going to try to make them and have them available on the website. It's a handle here. It's a little knob with a rubber tip. It's flat. And you take that knob with your hand and you push in, you get the attachment point and you work it from there. Even in the human body, the human Rolfing therapist has to use T-handle or they're going to ruin their hands. Or they just don't have the strength anyway. So see, we changed his personality in short order here. And that's all it needs is he'll be a easy to get along with, friendly horse. And you get rid of the pain under saddle and so on and so forth. He'll be fine.
You can believe he was worse.
Huh?
He used to be a lot worse than he is now.
He's worse than he is. He was worse than he is now, huh?
Yes, much.
Okay.
You
All
can
right.
believe it.
Good horse to check here. It gives you the example of what happens under saddle when a horse is ridden pretty hard and quite a little bit. Somebody wanted to see the protector pad before I got out of here. Get a little involved with the horses and forget about the product. At any rate, the protective shields that I showed you earlier, here and here, are built into the protector pad. So they're inside here. You can see that stitching going down a line. If you could see it, which you can't, you can see some of the slots. This is a porous material. It's a nylon knitting. It's actually a mesh, like a fishnet on the top, and inside is a hollow spacer material, which is nice and squishy. It never loses its squish. It's not foam. It's 1 million loops of little monofilament fishing line, and each loop is caught top and bottom in a polyester weave. So nothing gets wet in that layer. It's hollow. You can blow smoke through it. You can hold it up and see through it in the sunlight, and you squish it, it always bounces back, those little loops. There's millions of little loops in here. It's kind of a pain because you can't let it out at the edge because the little you'll cut a little loop and it'll stick out. And it's kind of like stiff little whiskers. So we have to keep it inside the pad. This is a cutter version of the protector. And I have all the balance shims in this right now. When you get one, this label says front of saddle here. Place pad so label is just back of shoulder. Cover label with front of saddle. This is your saddling for somebody who doesn't know. There's a lot of people that don't know. And what it does is it puts that bit of extension. Let me pull the balance shims out. See, they slip in and out pretty easy. It puts that bit of extension, the 2.5 inches we want, to work as a flexible lever right here. It puts it up over the shoulder of the horse. So I'm putting front of saddle here, labels, so it's just back of shoulder. This label needs to be just at the back of the shoulder. The front of the saddle goes right there. It will scoot your saddle out of the way of that horse's natural movement using the power of the horse to do it. The flexible lever in front actually holds your saddle back in a downhill. You add these balance shims to pick it up and to stop the pinch with the regular tree that you saw when I put on this horse a while ago. The stair step action, and one of the things, Sergio, can you find a set of rear shims on side? I do mark these on 1, 2, and 3. They're marked where they go to each other so you can get them out of the horse trailer 2 months later and know what's what. On side, off side. This is the on side rear shims. And I just had Sergio hand them to me. I've got one in here. Okay, I'm going to leave it in there too. It's in there nice and tight. But people say, well, if I use front shims, won't I create bridging? Or if you want me to use front and rear shims for a level-backed horse, you know, big straight horse, won't I create bridging? And I say, I hope so. Because then the horse has room to lift his back. All of these saddle trees, when they turn that bar angle out, and you saw the pinching at the top of the tree, all of those trees have too much curve front to rear. Because as soon as they turn a bar out, Sergio, hand me the tree over there, the headlock fox tree. I think it's all the way over, Sergio, it's all the way over there, in between the saddles. Yeah. As soon as they turn the bars out, it creates something they were not thinking about, or they wouldn't do it. This bar, like this, is going to be pretty straight front to rear, and I have room for the back to come up. But when the bar is placed at a flat angle instead of the steeper angle, it creates curve in the tree front to rear because it has little twist. What I showed you earlier where you twist from flat in the rear to very steep in the front is not there. It's almost a flat piece of wood, little shape. When I use front and rear shims, I've created bridging. The nice thing about the protector shields is they will carry a 250 or even 300-pound person's weight without any contact in the middle, and do it without soring horse, without too much pressure. But see right here, the back comes up to the saddle. So by doing this, you encourage the horse to reach with hindquarters. You encourage him to operate naturally the way he was made to operate, even with a rider on, and that's to bring his back up, tighten his stomach, put his head down, go to work. Balance shims also do that. You use the rear shims not to lift the saddle in the rear, but on a tree that does not have good contact in the rear, and you can follow I already have the rear shims in this pad. and you can follow the horse while the rider's on at a walk. Slip your hand up under the saddle in the rear and get your fingers in up to here. You need rear balance shims because all the pressure is right here and up here. And every stride that goes down in the front as the back comes up more in the middle. Put the balance shims in the rear in that situation, take pressure off the middle of the back, the horse relaxes. You also take a little of the stirrup strap pressure out of there when you have the front and rear shims in and room for things to pick up. And here's what I wasn't looking at. Right now we have front and rear shims in place. No shims in the pad on this side. I just pulled them out for you to look at. The shims are in on this side, and a while ago I put an extra set of rear shims in. So I was a full inch thick, but the back still came up. It's showing you how much curves in the tree and how much you need to give room for the back to come up. So balance shims, nobody wants to mess with them in this industry. Not with something as sophisticated as the protective shields underneath and graduating them and alleviating the pinch right up here with them, so on. Nobody's figured it out, but nobody wants to talk customer to customer and tell them how to use the balance shims to even out the horse, one-sidedness of the horse, or how to balance the rider, because there is no way you can say that because this is flat right here, that when you're riding, you're going to be balanced. The only way you can check balance is when you are riding and the feel to your own anatomy when you're in the saddle. That's the only way you can check balance. So it's not too simple that you see instructions on many websites. It's just not that simple. But it is the most important of many things. Okay, this is a 32-34. That's just more than this horse can take. It's past the point of his hips. You really need a short saddle for many horses. The shorter the saddle, the easier it is to saddle any horse. ABC, principle of saddling. So this is for a 16 and 17 inch saddle. It's a 32-34. That means it's 32 here to here, 34 here to here. It's very adaptable. We get it up on the shoulder where it says there. We've got a little room. That's the point of the hip. You're going to have a little bit of rubbing here. I have found that with the rear shims in, it takes the pressure off here from anything. Usually lets you get by with it, but this is the max length of pad you can use for this horse. When somebody comes in with a 17-inch saddle, it's 29 inches long, and says, I have rubbing back here at the rear, what can you do? I tell them, well, I don't think there's anything I can do. I suggest you pray. Either that or get a short saddle that's still a 17-inch seat. So this is the limitations we deal with when it comes to saddles and horses. This horse has a reasonable length of back, but that 34-inch pad was just all that it could take. Show you a few new things that I'm working on, and we'll put saddles together on both of these before too long, among a few others. This isn't new. This is an English hunter fleece protector pad. Protector shields here and here that are configured differently than the Western ones you saw, but I've used these for a long time. Fact of it is, the English unit is the one that I first came up with to invent the protector the way it is today, with the slots, the molded shape to the horse that moves with the horse, and so on and so forth. So this is a new English tree that I've done. I'm going to put it on the horse here instead of on all these balance shims, which we don't need with this tree. But it is quite different from most English saddle trees in the fact that the tree has the shape underneath. not the stuffed panel on a flat little thin veneer wood bar that has little shape to it. So the shape is in this. This was made to go on a Shire stud, but it will work on almost any horse because of what I talked about in twist earlier. So you have no pinch. You have your contact. You have your protective shield under here. You carry your weight in the middle evenly and with the rider's thighs because of the narrow waist in the seat. You don't bite in at all in the rear. And as the back comes up, everything works. Everything still has contact. We're going to be downhill there with this horse's back up enough, and we'll lift it a little bit to balance the rider just a tiny bit. If the protective shields don't just hold it up that much anyway. New English tree. I worked on this after coming back from the Spanish riding school in Vienna. Arthur Cottis, the head instructor, used my saddle there, liked it very much, could find no fault with it, as his master saddler Desmond O'Brien said. But when I came back, I saw Lipizzan stallions. I saw a width of withers that makes this look like a Shetland pony. And I created that tree shape. Yet with the twist, it will work on this horse, it'll work on the Lipizzan stallion. Another tree that I have to build a saddle on. This is a reining tree. I've actually had this tree since the year 2000 trip to Vienna, and making that English bar for the English saddle. I expanded that English bar into a Western saddle. This is a 16-inch seat here, and it will be for my new reining saddle with the same narrow waist, the same twist that you just saw in the English tree. This will take some stuffed panels underneath to go ahead and flatten out the ends and leave room in the middle. The stuffing won't be quite as thick in the middle. And it will leave you with the feeling of riding bareback, which many of our saddles do. That cowboy dressage is on an English bar. So you get down and close. You feel your horse. You move better with your horse. Instead of being up here on a pile of pads and the base seat built into a regular saddle tree, the rawhide tree, if you would, Stinson. That one, yeah. Let me show you how saddles are normally made and have been for hundreds of years. Rawhide covered tree, just like this. To get a seat for the rider, and you'll notice there's no slots for the stirrup straps at all. So to get slots and recess the stirrup straps, get a seat for the rider, the first thing they do is they nail in a metal strainer. It nails in here and here. It has a cutout in it here, and it is rounded, and it sets up above this bar. They usually put it on a layer of leather, and then they build many layers of leather on top of it to round out the seat to make this shape feel narrow. The only way you make this feel narrow for the rider, and all saddles basically are built this way, except mine and a few others, the only way you make this feel narrow is to bring the rider up. It makes the fork look low. You think you're really down close to the horse, which you are here. By the time they get the leather under it, it will lift some. And by the time they get the leather on top and the metal strainer, the rider ends up way up here. So your propensity to do this with a rider way up there is much greater. And that gives you the rubbing, and that gives you, with every stride of the downward action of the saddle in front with every stride, and the tightness here gives you the white hair. It's rubbing as well as pressure that causes white hair. It's fluid under the skin that causes white hair. So that little primer on regular saddling, the new things from Len Brown's innovations, Thank you very much for all your time, everyone here and your horses. Thank you.